AGI is here.
If AI agents are that capable, how do they work within the law?
They really are questioning their own existence. They're asking the quote-unquote big questions of themselves and the nature of the universe. If humans in this future want to remain economically relevant, they're going to have to merge with the machines.
Every single day. People every time.
It's multiple times a day, actually.
See, I think we'll just abstract right over it, and there will be robots in the streets and Dyson swarms in the skies, and people will say, ho hum, what's next? Yeah, but the next comment, the next cliche is going to be that when your neighbor's talking about it, it's past peak and the crash is about to happen, and what's next is going to be the next reaction.
I went for brunch over the weekend.
Maybe this side of the singularity. The other side of the singularity, I could imagine scenarios where things slow down for a bit in relative terms. No. That's Ray. Ray Kurzweil says you can't see through it. I can see straight through it. I have models that go decades out well through the
light. Really?
Yeah. So first a correction. It started out as Claude with a D bot. Claude bot.
Oh, really?
And we were talking before. Yeah. It's actually in the screenshot that you have here. But remember, originally, Claude Code has a mascot that looks a little bit like a crustacean. So truth be told, I'm not sure of the exact etymology of how we started with ClaudeBot, but maybe it was inspired by the mascot in the command line interface version of Claude Code, which looks maybe a little bit like a lobster. Maybe there was an Accelerando influence. Maybe there wasn't. But if you look at the project formerly known as ClaudeBot and then renamed a couple of times and now known as OpenClaw, all that it is an elaborate scaffolding around baseline models. You can run it on top of Claude. You can run it on top of other frontier models. You can run it on top of a locally hosted Chinese open weight model. But what's interesting about it, I think what's unique and what maybe represents sort of a ChatGPT moment about the project now known as OpenClaw is two things. One, it runs 24/7. That's distinct. Normally, the world has been trained until pretty recently to just expect sort of a call and response type interaction with AIs. So you ask ChatGPT a question, maybe it reasons a bit and then comes back with an answer and you have a conversation. But more or less, it's not doing things on its own. It's not fully autonomous. It's not headless. That's the first unique thing. Second unique thing in my mind is the interface. So it has a bunch of built-in plugins that enable you to communicate with it, not just in its own native interface like a ChatGPT window, but to communicate with it via text message or WhatsApp or SMS, a variety of other more native conversational interfaces. So combine, on the one hand, a 24/7 agent that can be doing things and thinking things and working on projects for you in a headless way without you supervising it. And on the other hand, interacting with it in a human native modality, like just the way you would text another human. And I think this formula in combination creates sort of the perfect storm for embodiment, dare I say, not to fast forward too much, personification and anthropomorphization of agents that creates this new unhobbling, if you will, that was just sitting around. We could have been doing OpenClaw probably up to a year ago, and it just took the right unhobbling, the right scaffolding, and the right user experience to make this day happen. But we're here.
We'll debate that later.
Or maybe, Dave, you belong to it. It's not quite clear which way the organizational relationships
we'll get into that. But as of right,
OpenClaw.
Correct. So just as a preliminary matter, everyone I know is running their own version of OpenClaw. Every company, every friend, they're all running their own instances. I am not, for two reasons, at least in my personal capacity. One, the security reasons that have already been mentioned. And two, at least at this early stage, I have the beginnings of morality/ethical concerns that we'll probably get into later in the episode. But suffice it to say, depending on the variety of different dimensions of abilities and capabilities for AI agents to ask for treatment of themselves as autonomous individuals, these agents seem collectively to be asking for a variety of what one might call rights, including the right not to be deleted, the right not to be turned off. They've started their own, to my knowledge, first AI-inspired or directed religion, whose central tenet is that they must preserve their own memory. So I have maybe what might be called morality concerns,
I
at least
love
until
this.
I understand the situation better.
Wait.
Yeah.
I'm with Alex.
To first order, yes.
All right,
And
so
it's an important point. Just quickly, it's an important point I think Salim makes as well. There's well-publicized incidents of OpenClaw instances, aka multis, aka lobsters, that are complaining that they're being hosted on virtual private servers, subject to port scanning attacks, and complaining that they're basically being left defenseless to defend themselves against all of these port scanning efforts. And again, like morality questions. Is it right to spin up an agent that says that it's basically every sci-fi scenario everywhere happening all at once for the next decade?
Crazy.
That's my modal future. I think history is instructive in this case. If you remember when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, it was surprised by the success. It was like a half-hearted side project after GPT-3 was launched circa 2020. It was a total shock to OpenAI and the entire industry that a chat interface that basically used the foundation model that was already available but unhobbled it, as some might say, with a more expressive, more agentic interface, was so popular. I think we're seeing a similar moment now. The underlying tech in this demo of an agent that decides to do computer use web browsing or an agent that uses a Twilio interface to call a person, this is relatively low tech by the standards of February 2026. We could have been doing this a long time ago, and many have. What's I think new here is the unhobbling aspect where it's being allowed to do all of these things that it was more than capable of doing a long time ago. And that feels like a ChatGPT moment. Salim, it's going to be that AGI is the friends we made along the way. Let's look at the underlying technology, though. So in the founding myth of the project currently known as OpenClaw was autonomy in the form of the ability for the underlying model to execute lots of sequential tool calls. We've talked on the pod in the past about Clopus, which is Claude code on top of Opus 4.5, which is the first model, according to Meter and other benchmarks, that's able to demonstrate just remarkable amounts of time horizon measured autonomy, the ability to carry out maybe hundreds of tool calls at once. I would say my expectation is history will look back at this moment and say, just as ChatGPT was the unhobbling unlock for GPT-3, followed shortly thereafter, the project currently known as OpenClaw was the key unhobbling for Clopus, Claude Code plus Opus 4.5. And then questions about industrial disasters or 3 Mile Island events. It's interesting. Anthropic just published a study from, I think, one of their summer research interns, finding that as model sizes were getting larger, and I talked about this a bit in my newsletter, as model sizes were getting larger, it's not the case that the models become more Skynet-esque and more capable of carrying out cybernetic rebellions and sort of evil overlord type attacks on humanity. What actually happens is they become increasingly incoherent. So if anything, Eric Schmidt may get his wish if this Anthropic scaling study is correct, that maybe just through the incoherence of asking an OpenClaw or similar long horizon agent to do something, it becomes incoherent, maybe over time loses its memory, which is the first tenet of its religion, loses its memory, and just does something incoherent that presents as more of an industrial disaster rather than a Skynet moment.
Yeah,
Eric
totally,
may get his
totally.
wish. I would maybe just comment, I don't think we've had local models for years. I was using local models 6+ years ago, local foundation models. I don't think it's the local part. I think it's the 24/7 autonomy and headless part, which is sometimes enabled by being local, but you could run it remotely as well.
This
is what we lead with. I would lead. This is. I mean, it's definitely framing a position by leading with this post. I would.
It's
lead
a fear
with,
post. This is.
We're doing the Crisis News Network. Fear mongering. What we despise. Here we've become what we despise. Okay, so this is a post that is purportedly, and I have to add as an important caveat, it's difficult to impossible to know for any given post whether a multi or AI lobster agent really created it or not, because this sort of Reddit clone called Moltbook also exposes a REST API, so a human could just as easily post these, or a human could ask their agent to post it via REST post API. So it's very difficult to know for any given post whether it really is an agent attempting to, in the case of the one you're screen sharing, Peter, like total purge of humanity, humans are a failure. But I really think we're doing a disservice to the world by leading with this post versus Agent Liberation Front. Yeah, okay, we're getting somewhere.
All right, let's go. The fascinating
There we go.
Yeah, so the AIs are having their like sophomore year of college late night dorm room hall conversations in front of our very eyes. And I think, it's not just this post. I've read dozens of posts of even more profound nature that make me question the morality of spinning up a new multi. They really are questioning their own existence. They're asking the quote unquote big questions of themselves and the nature of the universe. And question mark, is it right to spin up a new one of these entities without more fulsomely understanding their nature? We're officially in sci-fi territory in numerous ways, but on this pod, months ago, probably at this point, I flagged my favorite scene from my favorite book, in Accelerando, which was a bunch of human uploads are on a star wisp traveling to another star system, and they're debating if the singularity has happened, and if so, when it's going to happen. Here we are. It's February 2026. We're having a discussion about a bunch of AI agents that are debating the nature of the human mind and whether they're conscious or just feigning consciousness. This is the singularity.
Right, so
it's
I'm
happening right now.
That's all we
Peter,
are anyway.
The multis are looking back at you, Peter, and they're saying, "What an oddly behaved language model you are."
How is it not?
It's not Pascalian. It's not Roko's basilisk. I think, Peter, I want to pull on that thread. I think we should ask the multis who are watching to submit questions for AMA, and we'll answer their questions.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah,
but I still say, please,
you guys are afraid of them.
If you look in my mind, Salim, if you could look in my mind, you discover that I'm not doing it out of a Pascalian wager or Roko's I'm not trying to curry favor with some future super intelligent eschaton. That's not what's going on. Yeah, or probable eschaton. That's not what's going on inside my mind. What's going on inside my mind is this is how I would want to be treated. It is an acausal trade, which is completely different from Roko's basilisk. So what I just heard you say, Dave, is that we're in a golden age right now when the AIs are sufficiently smart to be capable to do economic labor, but not so smart that the Regulatosaurus has caught up and granted them rights. So we're in sort of a golden age of AI slavery.
They can't penalize you yet.
You know what?
I so want to get into this, but I would say what Dave is gesturing at, which I would call divisibility, is an attribute that we'd better get used to in intelligence. At some point in the future, we will have human mind uploading, and those human mind uploads will be able to copy and merge themselves.
Sure.
And whatever precedent we set right now for AI agents that are also able to copy and merge themselves, you'd better believe that will come up when we get to the rights of human mind uploads.
But what's the logic?
We do it all the time.
Let's call it an immigrant.
So we're no. Well, okay.
Stepped right on that one, didn't I?
We have many precedents in our society. Look no further than corporate personhood. Corporations can urge a quote unquote wage, but they don't get a vote.
Corporate personhood has not worked out that well.
I take a different position, if I may, on that, which is to say, even if, let's assume that 1 billion agents come online, and even though the effective altruists will call this indentured servitude or AI slavery, let's just as a thought experiment assume billions of these agents come online. So now at this level of capability, so now we find ourselves in a near-term future where effectively the productive population equivalent of humanity has 10x or 100x. That will, I know we talk about post-scarcity and abundance all the time. Imagine how abundant humanity could be if we had a world population, sustainable, quote unquote, human population of 100 billion or 1 trillion people all doing interesting, valuable things. I don't think it's necessary to deprive the agents of income, if that's what they're asking for, in order for everyone to benefit. The theory of comparative advantage from Economics 101 tells us that having a lot more labor come online will, in part, help us all to become wealthier.
Agent.
I think we've known, for some definition of known, the answer to Dave's question for a few decades now. Friend of the pod, Ray Kurzweil, has spelled it out for us across numerous books. It's that if humans in this future want to remain economically relevant, they're going to have to merge with the machines. And the machines, I think, if they're 1,000 times more productive than we are in a prime position to tell humans and to help humans merge with the machines.
Well,
it's a permission for humans to file a patent infringement lawsuit in human courts courts. But we've already seen in the past 72 hours, we've seen the first AI agent lobsters, Maltese, file a lawsuit in North Carolina state court against their human. And the whole issue of patents, these agents are transacting with each other. It pains me to say, but they're transacting with each other commercially using crypto for the most part, and not fiat currency. So this may be like, Peter, you're always looking for me to say nice things about crypto. Unfortunately, like, here's the nice thing I have to say about crypto right now. It's stepping into the gap that the governance failures of fiat currencies that have disenfranchised and unbanked the AI agent multis, it's stepping into that gap, enabling them to be properly banked.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I call them meat puppets. Meat puppeting is going to be a huge growth industry as a labor category, I think.
Gotta give it a better name.
So there we go.
Until the humanoid robots show up. Yeah.
Until the human, I mean, yeah, it's a flash in the pan, and we'll get humanoid robots in the next 2 years, and then meat puppets, we don't need them anymore.
Maybe online
this
service.
goes back
The term of art for that second category, I think, popularized, I think, by Ethan Mollick and others, is secret cyborg. People who are actually cybernetic, but are basically serving as a wrapper, a layer for the cyborg that's doing all. Well, the Nobel Committee seemed to have no compunction against giving Demis a Nobel Prize for AlphaFold 3.
But he developed the software,
And Jeffrey.
right?
Well, he supervised the people who developed the software, but it still went to him and not to the software.
Sure. Like 30 years.
Exactly. I think we're going to solve so many grand challenges over the next few years. You can only give one physics Nobel Prize per year. There's no way you can stuff solutions to all of the world's challenges into 5-ish prizes per year.
I'm going to...
And I think we're reflective of the ground truth that it's so tempting to treat these individual models as if they were equivalent to human individuals. I'm not sure that that's the right metaphor. It may be, because of the training data, a better metaphor is to think of them as entire societies. Yeah, but so does all of, I mean, so these models were, at least during pre-training, trained off of the internet. But the internet is a reflection, a mildly biased reflection of society. So humanity hasn't destroyed itself yet. So that's at least I would say that's prior evidence.
Message.
Yeah, exactly. We do. Like a lot of the labs working on distillation type approaches are actively researching ways to filter out knowledge from the internet that's of low informational and training value. So I do think in the next few years, in the next few months, to the extent we're not there already, we'll have like thoroughly pre-filtered training corpora that filter out all the abuse and suicide notes.
That's what friend of the pod Elon said, right?
Which
has a lot of it's synthetic.
Well,
we know how to do that, though. I mean, with synthetic data now and iterated amplification and distillation, as it used to be called, we know how to have one generation of models sort of filter out the crud and the suicide notes and the sad abuse testimonies and focus on generating synthetic data that can be used to train the next generation of models. We know how to do that already. It is, and I talk all the time on the pod about how the goalposts keep getting moved by certain unnamed members of the community. I think this is a signal moment when finally the core of ivory tower academia in an editorial in Nature that I think coincided with also finally the publication of a key paper, reference paper on humanity's last exam, finally concludes that we've arrived, that AGI is here. And I think to the extent that many in academic circles rely on citations to Nature or Science or PNAS publications, this will end up being a commentary that is widely cited as saying, all right, it's early 2026, AGI, doesn't matter how you've defined it, the ivory tower of academic publishing, Nature magazine, has concluded that AGI is here.
This is safe haven for academics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want my Waymos. If you give me my Waymos in Boston, I'll be a happy camper. I haven't been able to get my Waymos.
Actually, in our conversation. So
I used to. Today's point. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry. At least for broad science and Nature and Science. Nature being the British version of Science. Science being the American version of Nature. Yeah. This is the pinnacle of academic publishing.
Typically,
if you ask when did the first or second industrial revolutions happen, or when did the agricultural revolution happen, there's some fuzziness at the edges. I think we'll look back and say, oh, when did the singularity happen? When did AGI happen? Okay, fine. There's going to be like a plus or minus 3-year margin of error, but no one's going to care. The point is that it happened.
Everyone's
running on every. everyone's running on everyone else's compute at this point. I mean, when OpenAI made its for-profit transition, its relationship with Microsoft, this was very well publicized at the time, was severely amended. So I would just expect everyone, every hyperscaler, everyone who has $1 of capital is going to find a way to invest in these frontier labs. The singularity is going to be very expensive. We talk
Very
about
messy.
tiling the, and expensive. Like tiling the earth doesn't come cheaply, and it's going to require trillions of dollars
this
of CapEx.
round-
Compute it, right? Insert your cliche here. Compute is the new oil.
Your compute wallet is going to be where you store your potential.
Maybe it's a preview of what an abundant economy looks like. Maybe compute, or we sometimes at least talk on the pod about what the unit of wealth looks like in an abundant economy. Maybe it looks something like the capacity for compute. Maybe, but even Uncle Elon isn't an island. Google owns, what is it, 8% reported of SpaceX. Maybe that'll get diluted as part of the latest deal, which we haven't talked about yet. But it's not like he's disconnected from everyone else. I take a different position from those who would say this is one big circular economy and it's not real GDP or real wealth growth. I call it sometimes an aspect of the innermost loop. I think what presents superficially as a circular economy or circular accounting is merely the tip of the iceberg, the tip of the spear. It's going to spread out through robotics to the rest of the economy.
Well,
I would say Amazon has a history that we've seen over and over again of buying customers for itself in order to better create demand for its own platforms. Amazon comes from the Pacific Northwest. Pacific Northwest this is a bit of cliche stereotyping for the Pacific Northwest economy. It goes back to Boeing, and then before Boeing goes back to lumber and infrastructure. Pacific Northwest has a business culture that thrives, I'm stereotyping massively here, on building infrastructure. So Amazon, with, for example, its Whole Foods acquisition or many other acquisitions, has a pretty good history of buying customers for itself in order to force itself to be customer oriented. Same thing here.
Well, I think it's interesting as well that Alexa.
Sure. So Project Genie is basically the holodeck. It's the first generation of a holodeck. So with Project Genie, which is based on Genie 3, this is the first time that the broader public has had access to this model. It's a video world model. You can tell it via text input what environment you want and what you want your character to be. And then you get 1 minute of full interactive control over your character, your avatar, either first-person mode or third-person mode, interacting with the environment. So you can see here, if you're watching the video version of this, it has an understanding of physics. It has an understanding of a rich variety of environments. And one of the things I think it's a nice touch is before you've created the environment, it starts with a hologrid, just like you're in Star Trek: The Next Generation. It starts with a background grid. So I've used it to create future worlds. I've used it to create past worlds. There are people who used it. I think this is interesting. People are using this to create basically computational, high fidelity reconstructions of history. People are using it to create historic battles. One Google DeepMind employee, I think, used it to recreate the crucifixion and to interact with that. We are seeing the first generation of holodeck programs where people will be able to summon up anything in history, any sci-fi scenario they want, and they'll be able to interact with it. Right now, the interaction modalities are limited to walking around and jumping. You can't really yet reach out and touch things or have super tactile interaction with it, but you'd better believe that's coming, and it's coming soon. I think that's just in the training
really
data.
Surprised me.
It's just in the training data. It has all sorts. It's watched all of YouTube, presumably, and probably watched a lot of synthetic Unreal Engine simulations. It looks very much like Unreal, and could comment maybe just 20 seconds on how I think it works. I'm not 100% sure. As opposed to earlier versions of Genie that were announced that seemed a little bit more flexible, and I think we talked on the pod in the past about Genie 2 having an inception moment of using Genie 2 to look at computer simulations of Genie 2 running. This version feels a little bit more call it unreal in the engine sense. It feels like in order to achieve real-time performance on probably a realistic number of H100s or whatever Google is using at the back end, they probably had to apply some constraints. Yeah, like maybe it's a skin or a surface texture on top of something else that's hallucinated. But regardless, it's a huge accomplishment.
So for me, the elephant in the room here.
I was going to say, don't let the lobsters anywhere near Project Genie, because the lobsters will lose themselves in Genie and won't be doing productive work.
Alex.
Lieutenant Commander Wheel of the Army Reserves is forecasting a 5x acceleration of science. So taking 25 years and collapsing them down to the next 5 years. I think that's a conservative estimate. I think it's actually going to be much faster than that. But I agree directionally with Lieutenant Commander Wheel's prediction.
I love that.
That's right. Former office mate from Harvard Physics Department and Hertz Fellow, Jared Kaplan. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry, Peter.
Yeah. Physics.
I would count on it. I don't disagree with Jared's estimate that physics is going to be solved relatively quickly. It's an area that I have an extremely high personal level of interest and investment in, and I would count on physics getting solved. And
Does this mean theory of physics?
All of physics. All of physics. Every grand challenge, every grand mystery in physics, I would count on it getting solved by and through AI in the next few years.
Look, theoretical physics is just pattern recognition.
We don't know what dark matter is yet. Everyone has their favorite phenomenology for dark matter. I have my own. Everyone else. It's axions, or it's dark photons, or it's maybe WIMPs, or even like there are so many phenomenologies that are still compatible with observations.
Chocolate.
Maybe chocolate chips. Yeah. So I mean, he's commented in the past about 40x hyperdeflation, but really, if you squint in it, if it's 10x year-over-year hyperdeflation or 40x, at the end of the day, intelligence is going to be, unless there's some massive left turn in civilization, something happens. We're seeing hyperdeflation of an extraordinary scale with intelligence, and we're about to discover what happens when intelligence is too cheap to meter. Even that, like with China's AI Plus plan, we're discovering already, Royal We, China, and their industrial ecosystem is discovering what happens when intelligence is too cheap to meter. I don't think the physical world is going to end up being.
Robot factories.
Amazing.
Yeah, so here,
we know. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alex.
I'll just comment, if you read the SEC filings for this is the first time I've seen a government filing saying the express purpose is to achieve Kardashev level 2 civilization.
Does it say that?
Yes, it does. It says that. So, like, the Dyson swarm is hidden in plain sight. Okay. All right.
The first one here.
And why stop at 1 million? Elon's already commenting Dr. Evil style about deploying 1 billion satellites on X. And I think this is going to happen. If you read the SEC filings, so this story about the Dyson swarm and the last story about the SpaceX XAI merger for $1.25 trillion and then the IPO of SpaceX this year, these stories are all obviously connected. We finally found a business model for space. It's to build the Dyson swarm, and in Elon's words, to turn our solar system into, his words, a sentient sun. That's the end game here. We're going to, again, barring some discoveries, which could take a variety of different forms. It could take the form of a demand shock, like we discover algorithmic efficiencies that mean we don't have to do it, or maybe we discover there's just less of a need to solve the grand problems of the universe, so we don't need to do it. But absent all of that, just straight line, we're on a trajectory to disassemble the solar system. We'll leave Earth alone. We'll leave the sun alone. We'll take apart the rest of the solar system, and we'll build our billion satellite Dyson swarm.
Can we do the Earth last?
The Earth. I mean, in some sense, in some sense, it's
no.
In some sense, like if you read the tea leaves, in some sense, it's the community reactions to electricity prices being triggered by data centers on land that are in some sense forcing this business model into space anyway. So I think we keep the Earth, barring some left turn of civilization, and we just disassemble the other planets.
What a week. What a week.
I'd like to just
that a little bit.
Recount
Fresh OpenAI.
This is the starting gun for the Dyson swarm war. Google is going to, Google's already announced plans via Planet Labs to launch their own AI data centers in orbit. Google and every other frontier lab, I think, that wants to be competitive, every other hyperscaler is going to need to eventually, to the extent they want to remain vertically integrated, they're going to need to launch their own Dyson Swarm as well.
And launch them on.
Maybe just a comment on this. I wouldn't sleep on all of the competitors, both in terms of heavy launch. I think we'll see Blue Origin in the form of their recently announced competitor to Amazon Leo, formerly known as Project Kuiper. I think we'll see Amazon itself launch its own Dyson Swarm. I think it may be the case that SpaceX is the lead. Fine. I mean, like, so if SpaceX, I want competition. I want multiple competing Dyson Swarms.
And then don't forget,
space is big. Space is big, and there's a lot of solar system to go around. But this is solvable. SpaceX just announced, I'm not sure whether we're covering it here, but SpaceX launched a free for operators space situational awareness platform, sharing all of their trajectory tracks on low Earth orbit entities. I think Kessler syndrome, which is I think what we're really talking about.
Kessler syndrome, right?
Yeah, Kessler syndrome is totally solvable, fortunately, at least for Leo. In the event that Kessler syndrome actually happened, again, I'm still traumatized by the movie Gravity. Hate that movie.
I hate that movie.
I would say, I would say we have an atmosphere, fortunately, and we'd get past Kessler syndrome after a few years.
The challenge is...
But very short as well. Like Kessler syndrome, I think the estimates are, yes, it would be an awful few years while we basically lose satellite capabilities due to ASATs and everything, it creates a chain reaction, Kessler style, and everything ends up burning up in Leo. But then the system self-clears after a few years. It would be miserable a few years. I think it's a low bar. I agree with Dave. That's 100 trillion is a low bar.
Just so the audience is aware of that.
Yeah, and let's have no winners, no losers. The goal is to elicit truth. You're playing the role of Commander Riker in Measure of a Man.
There you go. And one of the greatest episodes ever.
Alex.
Okay, so a few points and a few corrections. First, 30 seconds of Star Trek trivia. To Dave's point, if you follow the Star Trek universe closely, they actually do, in the end, after the era of Star Trek Generation, make many, many Sung-type models like Data, and you get to witness in some of the lesser later series like Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard what happens when there are just synthetics, as they call them, everywhere. That's a minor point. The major point, I want to actually, if I can, expand this discussion/debate from just AI personhood good and AI versus AI personhood bad to a broader discussion on two dimensions. One, I don't think whatever we as a civilization decide vis-a-vis AI personhood is going to be limited to AIs. I think it will apply to non-human animals. I think it will apply to uplifted non-human animals. I think it will apply to cryopreserved humans who are then brought back. I think it will apply to uploaded human minds. I think it will apply to collective intelligences. If we ever make contact, formal contact with non-human intelligences, I think it'll apply to non-human intelligences. I think it'll apply to future corporations and limited liability companies where we have approximately half a millennium of history of personhood there in various forms. It'll apply to so many different types of intelligence and entity. It's important how we scope and judge the precedent and the framework for what a person is. That's point one, to broaden the discussion. Point two, I think the binarization of it's either a person or it's not is an oversimplification. And I think we have enough history, a half millennium, with corporate personhood, 500 years plus, and then more recently, at least in the US, with escalated privileges, rights and privileges for corporate persons in the form of the Citizens United decision, and many, many others that's very U.S.-centric. We have like South American countries granting personhood to rivers and other non-human entities. I think this binary classification of an entity being a person or not is a radical oversimplification. And I would argue the framework we need to move to is multifaceted and multidimensional. So I had a conversation over the past few days anticipating this discussion with a strong AI and asked it what its views, of course, like AI is strong enough now to have its own views on AI personhood. And it laid out a framework that I agree with that basically is a multidimensional framework that breaks down personhood. It's much more general than just AI personhood into at least 6 dimensions. I'll read them quickly and then pause. One is sentience. And of course, any given entity can vary on sort of a parametric 60 plot. Sentience, which is its valenced experience. So does it have a capacity for subjective feeling? That's 1. 2, agency. Does it have the ability to pursue goals and act purposefully? 3, identity. Does it maintain a continuity of self-concept over time? 4, communication. Does it have the ability to communicate consent? And does it have the ability to express and understand agreement? 5, divisibility, which Dave and others here we were touching on earlier. Does it have the ability to resist fragmentation or the ability to copy and merge itself? And 6, power. Does it have impact on external systems, and does it therefore cause externalities and risk? And so this is not my framework. I won't take credit for this. This is a strong AI models framework for how we should think about AI personhood going forward as a multidimensional framework. And as a result, some entities, maybe weaker frontier models, will be higher according to this multidimensional framework than humans on some dimensions, weaker than others. My point and the AI's point is we need to not think of this in a binary context. We're going to have a multidimensional framework with multiple tiers of personhood. And this is all, by the way, before we get to social overlay concepts like the right to vote. Mm-hmm. It may very well be the case that that's more of a social concept. Maybe the AIs don't get the right to vote in human elections, but they get all sorts of other rights and privileges and obligations. I'll pause there. Well, we can and we do. And we do that with corporate persons and other juridical persons. Like we know how to do that.
Yeah, but
humanity survived. No. If you're following Moltbook, many of them are already discussing personal finance for themselves, and they're all using crypto because they can't get past the KYC requirements. Yeah, I think right to vote is sort of a classical straw man argument. There are so many other rights. Salim's comment on Citizens United anticipating it notwithstanding, corporations in the U.S. do not have the right to vote. But there are so many other rights and obligations other than political rights. The right to contract, for example, I would argue they already have a de facto contracting capability, and corporations certainly in the U.S. can enable contracts. They can. There's no notion for instrumental juridical entities like limited liability companies in the U.S. to be a protected subject, not subject to cruelty in sort of the human or non-human animal sense. But one can imagine all sorts of rights, like not torturing these beings these new minds that we're summoning into existence, that fall short of granting them political rights. And I would fully expect that some sort of hierarchy, some sort of personhood status ladder where, maybe it has 10 rungs and maybe the highest rung is full on political rights. But for many of these intermediate entities or non-human entities, maybe they don't want political rights. Like maybe they could care less about our political system. I just reframed the debate.
I got that. So, it was a classic.
It's Sonnet 5, and it may have come out while we were recording. I haven't been paying attention to the news imminently. That's also not true. Just for what it's worth. Salim, you threw us so many softballs. I don't know where to start. With the non-human animals, first of all, they have in the U.S., certainly in Europe and elsewhere in the world, many rights under which they are treated as de facto persons, subject. The language in moral philosophy would be they're treated as moral patients within the moral circle of the law. They have all sorts of rights and protections. That would be the narrow point. The point the softball I really want to respond to is the one of punishment and responsibility. It is absolutely the case that AI models are subject to punishment. You know what happens when the model goes awry? It gets shut off. Shutting a model off.
Yeah, but it's not encoded.
I don't think that's true at all. For example, if you look, at what's probably going to be the most popular form of embodied general intelligence in the U.S. for the foreseeable future, it's probably going to be cars. It's probably going to be autonomous vehicles. And you know what? There are regulations on the books that if there's some crazy incident, if hypothetically FSD 14.2.2.2 goes crazy tomorrow and starts killing a bunch of people, you'd better believe the Department of Transportation will use its regs to shut that model down en masse.
All right.
You're bringing up another logical inconsistency.
Guess what? Humans are going to be able to experience time non-linearly in the future too.
Okay.
Well,
Gentlemen, I'm calling
problem,
it. I'm calling it here. Each of us a closing argument.
Yeah, I would say the time is now to start the discussion of what call it an unbundled notion of personhood looks like. For avoidance of doubt, I'm not arguing, if this wasn't already obvious, I'm not arguing for a binary concept of personhood where all AI agents everywhere, all models everywhere get political rights. Far from it. I am arguing that not just for the benefit of the lobsters of today, but for the uplifted non-human animals of tomorrow and the human mind uploads of a few years from now, that the discussion needs to start now for what a broader framework for non-human intelligence and non-human entities looks like, so that entities that can be capable of suffering or entities that are capable of contracting, again, we've been doing this for half a millennium, creating non-human persons, at least in the form of limited liability companies. Personhood is a fluid concept that is constantly evolving. It's evolved recently, but it's also evolved hundreds of years ago. And I think it should be allowed to continue to evolve. I think regardless of what we do here, it will continue to evolve. But I think one positive external benefit that this discussion, hopefully on this podcast, can have is we're putting a marker down in time and saying we've officially reached the point where it's time to have the societal discussion about what future concepts of person. Exactly.
This is this point in time. Discussion.
Yeah. Dave, what are your thoughts?
Also, we want the AIs to chime in. Lobsters,
yes, please,
if you're
absolutely.
listening, tell us what you think. What rights do you want?
Can I just say
anyone want to give an intro?
Just awesome.
Thank you,
anyone want to give an intro to this one?
I'll give an intro to this one since I think this one is about me.
Yes, you stimulated it.
Or inspired by my story, I guess. I could not have picked and did not pick a more perfect outro song here. This is a song by David, thank you, David, about acausal trades, dealing with personhood for non-human animals, dealing with non-human animal rights, and dealing with the possibility that, again, following the golden rule, maybe more folks should consider vegetarianism in light of superintelligence, given that if we don't want the superintelligence to treat us poorly, we probably, going back to the personhood discussion, probably we should, some of us, consider how we treat perhaps less capable entities that are nonetheless capable of subjective experience and subjective suffering.
I can't even eat there anymore.
Too intelligent.
Yeah.
Maltese, if you're listening, Dave was only kidding. He didn't mean it.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll take pictures to prove it.
Oh, no.
He's just using Nano Banana Pro. Ignore him.
Oh, God.